Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Marianne Petrie. I have back on the show, I have Coral Anika Theill. She had been on October 19th, 2022, season 3, episode 134. Now, she is an author of BONSHEA Making Light of the Dark. And this book shares her search for freedom and light in a society based on patriarchal religion and laws. And we're going to talk a lot about this because I'm going to bring on Mr. Christophe Difo on. And he did write the introduction to her book in 2021. And we're going to discuss patriarchy in the United States, as well as how it affects the court systems and probably other issues as well. But I welcome you both to the show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much
Thank you.
for having me. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate you both coming on. And, this patriarchy, it's gone back a long ways from parents patriae, all this stuff. It's very old. You know, I don't know if you can get out of it. you know.
Yeah, I don't know that you can either. I mean, I think, boy, I patriarchy is, I think, part of a multi-prong problem that is, I think, fundamental to the way our culture is, right? I mean, and frankly, I like to bring it back to we being animals, right? We are fundamentally apes, right? And just like any other primate, frankly, any other animal, I'll use an analogy here. If you have two dogs or two cats, one automatically knows where it is in terms of the hierarchy. There's
Mm-hmm.
one that's automatically dominant and one that's automatically submissive, right? That is sort of how that works. We human beings are a bit different, obviously, because we have we can reason, we have rationality, we have these things, but fundamentally we are fundamentally apes, and there is a part of us that is primed to submit to hierarchy and to impose hierarchy upon other people. And I think some of us are more like that. I think we call those people conservatives. I think people who are less like that tend to be a little bit more progressive. People who sort of reject hierarchy, who question authority, right? Those are those two things. And patriarchy is the most profound and most consistent form of that hierarchical top-down way of looking at the world. And look, I talk about this a lot. I think about this a lot. I think about this in terms of white supremacy. I think about this in terms of a lot of different things. But particularly in terms of Coral's story, there is no more clear, classic, awful example of the problem. So, I mean, have we come a long way? Sure. But the fact that Coral's sitting here and has written this book demonstrates that we still have a very, very long way to go.
Well, also, I think, Coral and I were talking earlier before you popped on about, these churches go along with this, what
Mm.
had happened to her and her experience. There's like no justice for people that have suffered within churches.
Yeah, I mean, I think, oh boy, yeah. I mean, I am I am personally an atheist, right? I am personally a secularist. I think that's really important. I'm not here to impose that upon anybody, but and I think that, and I mentioned this in the introduction, right? When we're talking about these Christian religious power structures, and by the way, I mean this happens in other countries and other systems as well, but we're talking here in terms of Christianity, because Christianity is a dominant religion in the United States, right? And the entire Western world. Um, so, when the church, the church just ends up being the perfect structure for this sort of patriarchy, right? Because people are primed, and I wrote this in the introduction. People are primed to care to think of God as first male, right? First and foremost male. So much so that people would be deeply offended if I go to a very hardcore Christian and I say, can't call God female or God or call God trans, right? I
Mhm.
mean, they would lose their minds, right? That is almost always true. So this it really is the Christian faith tends, not always, but for many people, really puts primes people to accept patriarchy. And so what you see then is the entire church structure, which until very recently is completely male dominated, but remains male dominated. And it ends up really priming young girls in particular to be submissive to their husbands, and it's certainly in the evangelical context, right? And I'm not talking about the universal Unitarians here. I'm not talking about all the progressive churches that there's tons of progressive churches out there that are very thoughtful and are doing great stuff. I'm not talking about them, right? We're talking about the top-down evangelical style, hardcore orthodox type of folks, and they'll be very open about that, right? That the God made woman in man's image, and the man is the dominant person in the home. They're very, very open about that, right? They don't even pretend to hide it. So as my I have a podcast as well, and my podcast host frequently she says, when people show you who they are, believe them. When they
Mhm.
tell you what they're gonna do, believe them. They just tell us all the time, and we on the left say, oh no, they couldn't possibly mean that. They couldn't
Mhm.
possibly, you know what I mean? But no, they do mean it. They really do mean
Yes.
it. And again, Coral's experience really is just so reflective of that.
Yeah, she has been through so much, and we got a good response off of the last time she was on. And, when she brought up talking about patriarchy, I was, very interested, as other people on my podcast have brought up patriarchy. And, you explained how it evolved and why it is what it is, but why are we entertaining it this long?
Why are we entertaining it this long? It's a good question. I think that first of all, there's just a lot of inertia, right? I mean, if you go back, right, so there are, I think, different theories about. Fundamentally, I think patriarchy comes from the basic imbalance of physical power between men and women. I think I mean, again, I am not out here. I am an employment lawyer. I'm not an archaeologist or anything. But in my personal study and what I've seen is right. The fundamental problem is that caveman, cave woman, right? Man can just simply murder woman if she doesn't do what he wants her to do, right? Man
Mhm.
can simply rape woman if she won't have sex with him, right? So
Mhm.
that is like that is like sort of the beginning of the power imbalance right there, right? So as society goes forward, and then you get to especially once you get to the agricultural revolution, that's where you get this point where, right, men and women's roles begin to be less sort of equal, right? In the hunter gatherer band, everybody has a lot of work to do, right? There are
Mhm.
the people do basically all the same things, but when you get to the agricultural revolution, then you end up with these roles in society, right? Man, woman in the house, man out working, where you end up with these roles, and that sort of cements, right? Cements that idea of patriarchy, right?
Mhm.
That of male dominance, and so we've built an entire culture and literally an entire civilization on that family unit, right? And expanding outwards. So man is powerful in his family unit, quote, king of his castle, right? We hear this all the
Mhm.
time, right? Every man is a king of his own home. And I know Coral has just awful experience with with
Mhm.
that kind of thing. And that just sort of expands out, right? And so I think a lot of this, Marianne, is inertia. It is hard to change like a human culture once it's rolling in a certain direction. One of the things, and I find this absolutely fascinating, one of the things that evolutionary psychology teaches us is that, right, we human beings will do just about anything to not have to stop doing what we are already doing. So a famous example, and this is a plane. A man, he's on an airplane with his family or whatever, and he goes through all this trouble to basically drill his family as to what will happen if the plane crashes, right? So if the plane catches on fire, if X, Y, and Z happens, because what ends up happening, and this is well documented, people just freeze in their seats. Even when there's a fire going on around them, they just freeze in their seats and they don't know what to do. That's why that's what they drill us every time we get on an airplane of what we're supposed to do, because we human beings, we get locked in this perspective of holy shit, excuse my language,
That's
holy
right.
crap, holy crap. I don't want things to change so badly that I am prepared to delude myself that things are not going to change. And that's just the extent to that things are not dangerous when they obviously are. That is the extent to which battered women, there's another great example, right? Battered women in these situations, right? It's really hard. There's a lot of structures that keep battered women, right, in with abusive husbands. But, right, a lot of people are willing to put up with a lot of crap rather than change. And so I think that there's, like, frankly, why we're still in this situation is because it's just cultural inertia. That's a huge part of it. And there's the second part of it is there are people who are benefiting from this, from patriarchy, right? Just like people are benefiting from white supremacy. There is every reason, if you are winning in this system, there's every reason to allow this system to continue. And we see this in the courts. We see this with the conservative politicians. They are openly supportive of, quote, their dog whistles are traditional marriage and traditional relationships. But what that means really is patriarchy and white supremacy. That's really what that means. We want to continue that system, and we don't want that to change. So that's my frankly long-winded answer to your question. I'm obviously very passionate about this, as you can see.
I know Coral also brought something along that she wanted to read.
Oh, please do.
Yeah, whenever I don't know if you're ready, Coral,
Yes,
or if you want to wait.
I appreciate everything Christophe was sharing as a individual that was in patriarchy for 40 years of my life, my childhood, 20 years of domestic violence in my marriage. When I'd go seek help, either a pastor, priest, a Christian counselor, the only thing they'd tell me is I had not learned how to submit enough. And that's all I was around. And even Bridgeport Community Church in Monmouth, Oregon supported my ex-husband, even knowing he had raped me during the period when I was ill and catatonic. They knew about my abuse. My brother, other people had told them. But when I told them I was leaving their church, I had only been there a few months, and said I was going to get a legal separation, they did not even believe in divorce. The Elder Brian King, came up to me and said, "Do you understand the sexual temptation you'll put your husband through if you go through with this?" That was concern, was my husband's sex life, not that I was soon maybe to be dead.
Oh no.
I just knew I didn't have much time. They told me to get safe, but
I have one. Hey, Coral,
yes.
do you hear the background noise?
I don't have any background.
No, me. I mean, because I hear drilling in the basement. Does anyone hear that?
No, I don't hear it.
You don't hear that right now?
No.
Okay, we'll keep going. I'm sorry.
Well, a lot of people, they tell me they're going to good churches, that would never happen at their church. But I think often they do not understand that I was the woman in the back room with their abusive pastor, and they wouldn't know about it other than I've written a book and documented my experiences. There is a wonderful quote by Dr. Bergen. She writes that in a study of battered women, Bowker, Bowker, in 1983, found that they ranked clergy members as the least helpful of those to whom they turned for assistance. So the church really is the most dangerous place to go for childhood rape victims, molestation, rape survivors, battered women. And the emphasis on some religious institutions on wives' responsibility to obey their husbands, and the sinfulness of women's refusal to have sexual intercourse with their husbands perpetuate the problem of marital rape. Most researchers of marital rape agree that rape in marriage is an act of violence, an abuse of power by which a husband attempts to establish dominance and control over his wife. While the research thus far reveals no composite picture of a husband rapist, these men are often portrayed as jealous, domineering individuals who feel a sense of entitlement to have sex with their property. And when you were talking about just how the church, how everybody's programmed, I reflected on that too and wrote about it. Let me find, this is what I wrote in my book, because I was even guarded when I was a member of the People of Praise, U.S. Supreme Court Justice, People of Praise cult, the one she belongs to. I was imprisoned in my own home. I was not allowed to leave. I couldn't call anyone. And basically, not allowed to the outside world. I was a prisoner, prisoner in the cult, not much different than Jim Jones. But I wrote, reflecting on that, I believe the reason why Christian religious leaders, counselors, and husbands fear women seeking help outside their religious supervision and structure is because counselors and shelters who assist battered women will put ideas in her head. They will teach her that she doesn't deserve to be beaten, that she's a worthwhile person, that she is capable, competent, and intelligent, and that she can think for herself, that she can do things for herself, and that she has the right to come and go as she pleases, that she has power over her own life, and that she can use her power to take good care of herself, and that she deserves to be happy and safe, and that she should be able to visit with friends and relatives when she wishes to do so, that she is not the cause of another's violent and abusive behavior, and that she has the right to live a life that is free from violence and abuse. These are not bad ideas. These ideas were truths she understood when she was born. They were already in her head, and they were just
Yeah, it's almost like this. Are you okay?
yes. I just
Okay.
remember though that time.
Oh,
It took me a long time to even understood I had a right to safety.
Yeah. That's very powerful, Coral. That really
yes,
was.
yes.
I
And a lot of
believe
people
that-
don't understand that, this stuff has, gone on with you, and it's still going on.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And
And our church, our court system is very much a mirror of our patriarchal system. That is a fact.
mhm,
It's a fact. They treat us women who are seeking safety, the same way we were treated in our own home.
mhm.
Mm-hmm.
District attorneys, I've been I suffered with my abuser, rapist in the courtroom. We were ridiculed and humiliated, and it's no different than how you were treated in the home. So many women, they navigate after years of abuse. What place can they? How can they go to one or the other? Like stay in a battered home, violent home, or go through our court system that will harm them even further? It's not a good choice.
Mhm.
Yeah, definitely not. What came to my mind, Coral, a couple times while you were speaking, and I, by the way, always really love hearing you read and speak because you speak with such passion and such compassion as well, I think, about these issues, and and you really are a guiding light, I think, for so many women, and frankly, I think also for the men like me, anyway, who want to understand this, right? Who don't want to be part of this patriarchal system. One of the things that came to mind as you were speaking was, you talked about just submit, right? If you just submit more, then you will be happy. So if you're a woman and you're coming to the church clergy and they say, and you're talking about this abuse and they say, well, what you're doing is not submitting enough. And that reminds me of what a lot of conservatives and will say about black people and the police, right? Just stop resisting, right? If you just submit, they won't beat you. If you don't just submit, they won't shoot you. If so, and the what is implicit there is if you just are okay with this system, right? If you just say, yes, you know what? You really are more powerful than me. You really are better than me. I don't deserve freedom. I don't deserve justice. And as long as you're willing to do that, right, then don't worry, you'll be safe. And that's like putting a gun to my head and saying, look, I won't shoot you if you don't give me money. And then if you give me money, I won't shoot you. And then saying, and then making that my fault, right? Like, right, no, that's not my fault. You're holding the gun to my head, right? Like, whether or not I give you money is beside the point. You are creating this system. You are creating this situation. That is why we're sitting here. And so to put it on you, the woman, put it to you, the black person, put it on you, the gun victim, right? What you're doing is gaslighting that person, right?
Yes.
What you're doing is brainwashing that person into believing that if they just do exactly what they want you to do, that you will be safe, right? But that safety only exists to the extent that you are prepared to do exactly what that oppressive system is asking you to do. And that is not freedom at all, my friends. That is not freedom at all. That is bondage. That is bondage. That is bondage. That is bondage is what that is.
Most definitely. And I think with young girls growing up, I think, they see a beautiful white wedding and they want that. And then they meet someone and things move really fast and no one's aware of these red flags.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to pick on guys because I know, patriarchy, I think represents men. Maybe I'm wrong, but okay.
I think that's right. Yep. I think that's exactly right. Yep. That's where the problem is. That is where the problem is. Men, right? That is definitely where the problem is.
Well, okay. Cause I don't want any guy to feel bad because there are some good guys out there that wouldn't buy into this either. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. But, so this woman marries this guy and then he starts becoming a personality disorder. And she doesn't know what to think of that. And it goes on and then it gets worse. And then sometimes it could get better. And then they have a kid and then, okay, there it is. Right. And, it's like, how do we warn our young people? And I mean, young men and women about this system of patriarchy, because, even older parents would say, and this was actually said to me when I told my parents I was getting a divorce. And my mother said, well, as long as he's not drinking or beating you, you don't have a problem. And I said, I feel he could kill me. I mean, that's what I felt, because he revealed a dream to me in which this happened. And so I thought it was time for me to go. Okay. But, these young people don't have support from parents, and I think with Coral too.
Yeah. I think that's right. I mean, I think that's right. And, I wanted to just go back briefly to what you said at the top of your comments there. And you mentioned, right, you don't want to pick on men. And I think that's right. There are good men out there. I think that's right. But, hashtag not all men. Have you heard that before, right? Like that is, it's almost like it's a kind of a joke about as soon as someone says, men are doing X or another one, right? White people are doing X, right? Mm-hmm. And it's like the not all white people, the not all black, not all men, that is implied, right? It's like, it's definitely not all men, right? It's definitely not all white people. What this is are systems, right? In which people are sort of part of. And to get to one of your points too, is like, right, patriarchy hurts or a comment I wanted to make is patriarchy hurts men too, right? That's the thing, right? Because again, I think it's really important to differentiate between the individual man, say me, and the system in which we operate, right? Because generally speaking, we all basically do what the people in our system do, right? So if you grew up in a certain neighborhood, whatever that neighborhood is, odds are you basically are living the very similar life to everyone else in your neighborhood, right? Probably went to a similar school. You probably went to a similar college. You probably got a similar kind of job, or you didn't get a kind of a job, maybe. And these things, this is how this works. So men get wrapped up in this patriarchal system, and a patriarchal system that doesn't allow them to have meaningful, loving, deep relationships with the women in their lives, that disdains women, right? That doesn't allow them to express themselves, right, as individuals, right, except for anger. And this is where the alcohol problems come from, right? So it hurts men too, but it does not hurt men like it hurts women. And that's the point here, right? Women are absolutely the people who are being absolutely screwed by this system. You talked about, the young people. And what I wanted to connect this with is abortion rights, right? Because you get married, you're a woman, young woman, you get married, you get pregnant, and now you can't get out of that situation, right? So let's say you are 19 years old and now you're pregnant and you haven't gone to college, let's say, or now you have to drop out of college. You can't get a good job now. Now you're reliant upon this man. Right. And you also can't get out of the pregnancy. So now you are in this situation where you are stuck with this man. You are essentially imprisoned by your need to survive in this world and take care of this child. So and look, I mean, I think how you solve these problems is it is complex on the progressive side of things in places like San Francisco and places like New York and places like and liberal hubs in places places like Florida and Texas, right, where the education system allows people teaches kids about that they have a choice, like, right, that they can use birth control, that doesn't try and trick them into believing that they can just stay abstinent, right? And that's a realistic goal, right? And that teaches kids about sexuality, teaches kids about these life skills. I think that's where you have to start, and that is a battleground that is depressingly going against the way of progress, right? I mean, they don't want to talk about anything there. So I think that really, it always comes down to how do you change the minds of the next generation. I will say this: I am optimistic about Gen Z. I think Gen Z really has gotten the absolute shaft in even more than the millennials. That I'm a millennial. I'm an old millennial, very old millennial.
No.
I'm on the cusp of millennial and Gen X. On the year. I am 41. And I think Gen X starts. I was born in 81, and Gen X ends in 80. So people make fun of we millennials got screwed by the Great Recession, right? We graduated right into the Great Recession. It was really, really tough. But Gen Z has really gotten the shaft. I mean, it's just one thing after another.
Oh, are you there? Coral.
Oh, I'm here, but I think
Okay. He froze.
Yes.
Zoom is horrible sometimes.
Sometimes that happens.
I know.
Until he can come back, you were talking about change. How do we change?
Change this, yeah.
Starting with just programs like this.
Yes.
Out about our experiences, writing books, and speaking for those who have not found their voice and those who are no longer here that do not have a voice. And find as a child, I kind of think of it as brainwashing when you're brought into even a church environment and you're told this is how it is, this is the only truth. And so many churches, thousands of them, that's the only truth. But it's a wonderful gift now to be able to examine life and against what I was told. And most all that I was told I had to leave behind to be a whole person. And
you have to start over. It's like completely picking up everything and just starting over.
Like jumping out of a plane without a parachute.
Yes.
And I'm very grateful. It's like I didn't know what was ahead, but early on, I met someone on the Pine Ridge Reservation. He was a domestic violence advocate, and he wrote the foreword to Matilda Joslyn Gage revised edition of Women, Church, and State. It was first published in the late 1800s. And there's a Matilda Joslyn Gage Foundation in New York. And about the church and the oppression of women and children. And everything she wrote, I resonated to. I do cite her in my book, but that's a good start for many people if they want to understand just the history of religion and the oppression of women and children. Sadly, even my own children, most of them have adopted fundamental Christianity and have been brainwashed to hate and despise me. That'll be, it's always going to be a sad thought, but they're on their own journey. There's really not much one can do. I wrote a book that's some love letter to them, but it'll be, their own decision, their own choices now on their journey.
Well, I'm glad you wrote that book. Hopefully that will be a map for them, to have something to go by.
Or maybe when I'm no longer even here, something that maybe in their older age, they may understand what they don't now. But patriarchy, it does have a hold on people and just their viewpoint of who you are and the judgment. And I found in my own life, a lot of the people of my past, they were a judge, jury, and executioner. And I found most all lacked empathy and compassion. And what even haunts me to this day is the cruelty, even to this day. And many people that I meet that are very ingrained in patriarchy, that does come out.
And you are absolutely right. It's all cruelty, especially in these family courts.
Yes, like even for me, I begged for my nursing baby. I asked if I could even have time to wean my baby, and it was no. They didn't care. And I went into shock. I did, and I am still in shock years later. And I know we've done that in America. We did that to slaves, and that's horrifying. This is different. It's, but a same horrifying feeling to have your baby and children just taken from you.
Well,
survive it.
Right. And I hope Christophe can jump back on, because I also wanted to ask him, why are female judges taking part in patriarchy? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
And I think they feel maybe it's about power, but really they don't have the respect of men anyway. It's maybe there'll be a few higher rungs on the ladder, no matter if it's in a cult or in religion or courts, but they're still looked down on, and they'll still be a second-class citizen by the men that they're competing with.
But then, why are they taking it out on women litigants?
Well, women can hate women. That's
right.
And I have experienced that. I find too, a lot of women who I meet in this life often, I don't share the truth of my story because I have a record of almost 100% of how a lot of women react. I mean, there's a few exceptions, but we are the walking picture of what every woman's nightmare is. Your children, someone taking them. And there's definitely there's something that goes on when they meet you and you have survived. I think inside them, they know they may not have survived. And there's just often this hatred towards you that they share towards you. They say the most cruel things.
Oh, yes.
A woman here go back to the West Coast on a trip to visit a friend, and I couldn't go. I had to make the trip later. I just said I was too traumatized. Hello, Christophe.
I am
You're
so
back.
sorry. I don't know what just happened. I mean, I'm just talking and then
back.
poof.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
Everything in my house just turned off. Everything.
Oh.
We have questions for you, and we're
Yes.
talking about women judges and how women, how they treat some of us women who have lost our children, who are battered women who have lost everything. And I was sharing with her, just locally, even a woman, educated woman. I was in a volunteer group, and she thought I was going to be gone on this trip to the West Coast, and I said I just couldn't do it. I had to postpone the trip for 6 months. I'm just too traumatized thinking of going back, and I will later. And she looked at me and said, I don't know what's wrong with you. That was a long time ago. And so many people say very cruel things, or there's just this, I think women hate us for things that they fear. And Marianne had a question for you too, wondering why women judges are often more cruel than even the men judges that we in our family system.
So that's so interesting. And right. And I think those two questions are related, right? I think that there are women. So my partner, not my marriage partner, but my podcast partner, Liz, and she's absolutely amazing, and she's like a powerhouse feminist, and maybe one day we should come back on the show together. But she calls the women who these women crumb maidens, right? Women who are happy to just get the crumbs of the patriarchy, right? That they feel safe, they feel protected, they don't want to go out there in the big world, and frankly, they've been socialized to support patriarchy. And so when they see women like you, Coral, like you, Marianne, who are out here talking about these issues, who are speaking out, it threatens them. It threatens them if somebody attacks something that you identify with very, very deeply, right? Like something that's part of your identity, right? If somebody attacks that, it feels the visceral reaction that one can have to that can be very powerful. And I think that in the extreme examples, you have the women who are literally part of this system, right? You have the women who are the handmaids, and who are not maybe the handmaids, but who are the leadership within, like Amy Coney Barrett, right? She's sort of like a leadership woman position, still always below men, but lording over women that are sort of less than on the hierarchy. You have those kind of women who are going to adamantly and angrily defend and try to attack and tear down a woman like Coral. But then you also have these judges, right, who are ostensibly they must be very highly educated. They must be lawyers at a minimum, right? And they have years of practice experience, probably, hopefully. And these people are equally committed to the status quo. I mean, and the status quo, unfortunately, is patriarchy. That is the status quo. I mean, I think about this and I make this analogy. I've made this analogy many times over the course of this conversation. There's an analogy to be made here to white supremacy. There are Black people. Tim Scott, I think from South Carolina, he's a Black senator who is a conservative, right? Who there are always people who feel that their proximity to whiteness, their proximity to patriarchy will allow them to be protected and brought under the wing of those systems. So they're prepared to put up with the abuse. They're prepared to be the token Black person or the token woman or the et cetera, because they get some sort of value from that, right? I think that it's easy to just say they're voting against their own interests, and that is true, but I think it's more complicated than that. I think they think that their interests are connected to patriarchy and are connected to white supremacy. And it's terrifying, especially like I know you've had this horrible experiences, Coral, in the system, right? And Mary,
100%. I'll share just 100%.
please, yeah.
Churches, and you know from my own memoir and what you wrote too, but everyone surrounding my ex-husband and our family supported him. Everyone. And even to this day, I've been in court legally stalked for 20 some years, 50 court hearings, pushed me to poverty, pushed me to living out of my car. But the churches, the pastors, the elders, his family, immediate family, they all support him. And my children, they go to court too, support him. So that's definitely a horrific statistic.
Yeah.
So sad. I mean, because you're their mother, you know, and Christophe, what do you think of that? Because I know these kids have been brainwashed. Some of them haven't. Maybe they're just being spiteful and going along with this. You know, that's your mother.
Yeah, I don't even know. It's hard to fathom, frankly. It's hard to fathom. But I mean, look, I've had experience being a young person under the influence of a powerful cult-like environment, right? And you know, I grew up in a organization called Church Universal and Triumphant. It still is actually, but a fringe religious organization / cult, depending on different people will say it differently. But bottom line is, and by the way, it was run by a woman, but not a man, but it was still a very patriarchal environment, definitely a very top-down hierarchical environment regardless. And, you know, I grew up believing things that were patently untrue. I mean, like obviously untrue, right? And things that today I look back on and say to myself, holy crap, how could I have believed that? But, you know, I think that as young people were so susceptible, even more susceptible than adults, to being co-opted by philosophies and by ideas and by just sort of our parents being sort of, you know, almost godlike figures in our lives for most for you know, when we're young. I think that what it's really reflective of is, you know, I'm not a parent, and I don't plan to be a parent, but one thing that I think a lot about in terms of parenting, because I think a lot about how I was parented, and, you know, what parents often don't teach their children, certainly people that are orthodox religious type folks, is critical thinking. That is discouraged, like actively discouraged, right? And in these hardcore religious environments, that is seen as like the devil's work, right? Thinking critically, asking questions, questioning authority. Questioning authority is, and in my home, questioning authority was that was equivalent to the devil's work, and asking questions. So it really is this, you know, this authoritarian, and you know, and when you grow up in an environment like that and it's not challenged, and you don't have circumstances in your life that end up challenging those beliefs, it's really easy to carry those into adulthood. And next thing you know, you're voting for Donald Trump, right? Next thing you know, an authoritarian idea sounds good to you, right? That sounds normal to you. It's sad. It's a sad state of affairs, to be sure.
And it's like the parents ingrain, well, what they were raised with, right?
I think that's right.
I don't know. It's just, it's like something, are they going to be able to break this wheel? I don't know.
Patriarchal, patriarchy, it leads to ownership. Just who we are under patriarchy. And even slavery was that.
And by the way, it's not, and we wrote about this in the introduction. We'd like to think that the United States is an area and is a country, and has a constitution that that is anti that kind of thought, right? That is anti-authoritarian, that is anti-hierarchy, but it's not. I mean, right? The Constitution, as it was written, absolutely is a blueprint for white Christian hegemony, like hegemony. That's what it is, right? It's like we've had to amend it to make it work at all for people who are not white, male, and Christian. We've had to literally amend it, and people are fighting that tooth and nail every step of the way. So, in this country, I think in a lot of countries, and we're better than a lot of countries, to be fair, but there's a lot, much, look what's going on in Iran, right? Like that's patriarchy, right? That is
Right.
and that's not to diminish what's going on here in the United States. But that is where the United States could end up if we just allow theocracy just to go, right? Like that is a couple steps down the road, but the United States is very much could go that way, right? I mean, that is what a lot of the folks, conservatives want. But bottom line is, the United States sets us up for a patriarchy. The way that from the very, very beginning, it was always a patriarchal system, and it's only not a patriarchal system to the extent that we continue to fight generation after generation after generation against these systems of oppression. That's just how it is, and that's true in other countries as well. Every country has their own problems in this way, but ours are very specific, and they are enshrined in the Constitution, and it's up to folks like us to undo those things over time.
Mm-hmm. It's going to take so much time with all of this ingraining and brainwashing that, parents have done with their kids, like in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, even. It just, and the thing is, with the not just female judges, but the male judges are also twice as bad as the female ones that take these kids away and give them to the abuser.
It's so disheartening. And I mean, one thing that is, becoming friends with Coral over these last couple of years has done for me is really made this all very concrete for me, right? I talk about injustice all the time, right? And I talk about injustice in the legal system, I talk about injustice in the political system and in our social systems, but it's very different to talk about that in the abstract than it is to actually to be friends with somebody, to be close with somebody who is living this in real time. And it will take a long time. It'll take generations. I mean, I think I remember there being I think this might have been the 50s or the 60s, but it was a poll. It was even maybe later, maybe in the 70s. But a poll brought, of men and whether or not it was okay to hit your wife, or spank your wife. And the poll overwhelmingly was, yes, that is fine, right? And so those people are still alive, right? Those people are still voting, right? Those people are still in positions of power right now. So that mentality doesn't just go away. Yeah. So right. And we see that it does not just go away. And by the way, this is not just an American problem, right? This is a huge problem in Africa. This is a huge problem in South America. The patriarchy, it pervades. It's one of the things that, unlike a bunch of other problems that we have, poverty, racism, all the other problems that we have in the United States and world, patriarchy is across the board, every country, everywhere. Women are the largest oppressed class of all time, no matter where you go. It gets worse the poorer the country gets, the worse it tends. But it is a problem everywhere. And I am, again, becoming friends with Coral, talking to Coral really has lit a fire under my ass. And I am not a big shot. I am just a guy, but I really do try in my daily life to confront patriarchy when I see it. And I think that is the best that we can all do. I mean, we can do our podcast, we can talk on social media, and we should do those things. I think the real challenge comes when we face it in our day-to-day lives. What am I saying when someone makes a joke, like a sexist joke, a racist joke? Am I standing like a transphobic joke? Am I standing up for them? Am I being very clear that I am not a safe space for your bigotry? I am not a safe space for your patriarchy. And that is one thing that I can do as an individual person, just trying to do my best,
What do you say when you hear these sexist, patriarchal comments? What is a good comeback for this?
Sure. That's a great question. And I think it depends on this, depends on the environment. But if it's someone that I think that if it depends on the environment, right? So if this is so I'm a big motorcycle person. I ride motorcycles and I ride them and I ride around the world and I do that kind of stuff. And I was at a motorcycle rally recently, and and there was a couple women there, which is not, there's usually a handful of women, not many, usually male dominated environment. And so this is a place where, a lot of guys think that they can, be off color, which you can be off color and not be a bigot. I think there's a distinction to be made there, but, in that kind of an environment where I don't know a whole lot of people, what I'll do is talk to when that joke comes up, I look at the women and I'm just like, right? Like, I'm with you. I'm not with them, right? I am with you. But in a more personal environment where it's on like a one-on-one or in a group setting, like out at a restaurant or with friends or whatever, then there's two ways I approach this. If it's really egregious, then that means in the moment, like, I'm not cool with that, and that's hard. I think a lot of people, I'm an outgoing person. I am a person who I'm kind of in your face. That's just sort of how I am. But so for me, it's hard to do even for me. So I understand that is a difficult thing to do. Like, that was not cool. Like, no, not around me. Right. I'm sorry. Like that is like, or, and the best way to do is sort of make them feel uncomfortable by just saying like, so do you usually say bigoted stuff like that? Or is that just to make it clear, like, that's a bigoted thing to say. And so, and then, and if this is a person who, if it's a little bit more low key or is sort of under the radar, then maybe you pull them off and you have a relationship with them, maybe after the conversation, right? And this might be easier for most people. After the conversation, after you've gone home, you send them a text. You know what? I just didn't think that what you said there made me feel a little uncomfortable, right? That was and I think the best way to ask that question is like, would you have said that if there were a woman, if you knew there was a woman here? And would you have said that if you knew there was a Black person here? Would you have said that if there was a gay person here? And that puts them right on the spot, right? Because they know they wouldn't have said it when that person was there, right? They only say it precisely because they think there aren't those people there, right? That's why they said it. So I think that there's different circumstances, and it's hard to know when the best time and how to do that is. But I think those are some of the ways that I would do it. And I think that for those of us who say we care about social justice, that we say that we care about patriarchy, that we care about defeating patriarchy and white supremacy, I think that is something that we can all do all the time. And by the way, it gets easier with practice. It gets easier with practice.
I wish that every church, because they are in the dark ages, would teach about domestic violence, rape, child abuse, child molestation. But in the church, Catholic Christian, there's an epidemic of children even being raped. And I've learned, I've received so many thousands of letters from people who've been harmed in the church and women who've been harmed when they're seeking safety by the church. But often children, even if they come forward, their parents abuse them if they report that a pastor or priest has harmed them. So, something that I'm asking that, I sometimes ask pastors or clergy, when was the last time you ever had a sermon on this subject matter? And they don't. And I often wonder, is that because the ignorance of this and keeping people to where they don't feel safe? That's probably what they want. But 3 women are murdered a day by their husbands or partners in America. And the situation with rape of children or adults is just epidemic. And so many people don't come forward, either due to the stigma, or if you're in a church or patriarchal surroundings, you will be further harmed or re-victimized or shamed. So that's where I feel is the basis of patriarchy has created such a place too of ignorance. I didn't know, through all my years in church, I knew what was happening to me. There was just no one to go to.
Mhm.
And that is the most awful thing about this, right? Is that this prison element of it, right? Is that it's not just that women and children are being abused. It's that they can't escape it even if they want to, right? Like there's nowhere to go. And that's because, right, we have a situation, we live in a patriarchal environment where people, where we have terms like, one of my favorites, one of my more despicable ones is underage women. What does that mean, right? Like, what does that mean? You mean girls? You mean children is what you mean, right? But we said this woman was had unwanted sex with an underage woman. Like, whoa. You mean he, and by the way, the he isn't even there, right? That's it. They do it in the passive voice, right? A underage woman was subjected to unwanted sexual assault. So the man's not even in that sentence, right? So it is a passive voice. And what you're saying is that, what it is, it puts all the onus on the woman. First of all, she's not a woman, she's a child. And second of all, so what we should be saying is a man raped a child. That's what happened. That's what happened. But because we live in a patriarchy, right? And this is sort of dovetailing with your point, Coral. Since we live in this patriarchal environment, that's an example of the patriarchal environment that makes it such that women don't feel comfortable going and taught safe, because it could make it worse. It could make the situation worse, right?
Even example, I was threatened by Pastor Bill Hurd of Roseburg, Oregon, and my husband. At the time, I was wanting to seek safety to not report the rapes, even of my daughters or of myself. They wanted them to be a family and church secret. And I knew my older son needed help. My daughters definitely needed help. They needed to go to their pediatrician. But with secrets, nobody would have been allowed to go to a doctor. A doctor has to report it. So here's a pastor who didn't report it. I had to go to an attorney in secret and report it, and then get a restraining order.
Sure.
Before I could even go to the sheriff's and report it. But here's pastors threatening me. They threatened to put me in the Oregon Mental Hospital if I did such a thing. So I was off to get an attorney, not for a divorce immediately, but for the safety of my children. And I'm now the bad person.
That's right.
The right thing. So this is just a normal thing in church environments, and even you're shunned by people. Just it's like a threat. You did what is right by the law and right by your family and children. The other thing, when I sought safety, the Polk County Sheriffs of Dallas, Oregon, hunted me. Like I was an escape person, an escaped slave, which I was. But all true examples, and even an example that I could live with my husband and be abused and be with my children, or if I left, I could not. And I was welcomed back, even though they said I was crazy, mentally ill, unfit. But I was welcomed back to be with my children. But if I was away, no, I could not see my children or be with them. So it's quite a mental. You attempt to hear out all they're saying, and it's like they want it both ways. It's insane even to think about or write about.
I mean, the entire system is designed to protect the power structure, right?
Yes.
And this goes to what I wrote in the in my introduction to Coral's book, right? It's this. There's a power structure that's here that it's complicated. To call it Christian is I call it Christian. It is because it is Christian, but it's not really based on the Bible per se. It's just based on protecting a group of men's power. Like that's the whole thing. And that's to your point, Coral, when they're like, they want to keep it a secret because otherwise people won't believe in the church. They won't believe in the authority of the church and the authority of the pastor anymore. So it really ends up being all about protecting the power of a handful of people. And by the way, this extrapolates all the way out to our current political climate, right? The entire Republican Party exists right now to protect the power of a handful of very, very wealthy men in the country. Like, that is the protection, and including Donald Trump, but even he is and Mitch McConnell and these people, they are ultimately tools of a handful of plutocrats, essentially, right? Who basically run the country, right? Who have where all the money flows to. And so this system of protecting unearned hierarchy, back when I used to work with Sean Prophet, we used to talk about this all the time, is this unearned hierarchy. That is the situation that we're dealing with here, whether that be an unearned hierarchy in a patriarchal church system that Coral dealt with, whether that be an unearned hierarchy of billionaires who own the entire system, right? I mean, the entire system of how we operate in this country, and including they own the legislatures in our Congress. They literally own them, right? So they dictate their actions. So it's always about achieving, sort of maintaining that power structure. And this gets back to where I started on this entire thing, which is, at the end of the day, we are apes. At the end of the day, there are some apes that want to be at the top of the hierarchy at all costs, and they don't care who they crush. They don't care who suffers. That maintaining that power and at the top of the hierarchy is more important than anything else. And there's something deeply animal about that. And hopefully those of us who use our minds and use our brains and use our compassion and our empathy to try and counter that instinct, I think are, like I said, we call ourselves progressives, we call ourselves thoughtful. But there are a lot of guys out there, and they are guys. They are overwhelmingly men, definitely overwhelmingly men, and they're crumb maidens that are happy to support them and tear down other women who want freedom. They are out there, and it is, I'm not a doomsday prophet, but boy, it is tough out there. It is tough out there for women, and we are a long way off from that, from any kind of equality in that way, a long way off. And I'll finish with this. I know I'm babbling, but
no, you're fine.
It is up to men. It is up to men to stand up. Women, right? Like first of all, there's going to be a whole bunch of women who are not going to stand up. Some women will, and then just like Black people don't get justice without like-minded white people, women don't get justice without like-minded men, and men that are willing to speak up, not just sit there silently and allow it to happen, but speak up and stand up and use their privilege and put their own privilege on the line. That is what it is to be an ally. And that's what I hope to be. That's what I hope I am. And that is also, by the way, what I demand of the people and friends in my life, the people that are in my life. You don't get to be in my life if you're not going to be an ally. I'm sorry. I just don't have time for it.
Mm-hmm. No, I think you're right. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Another point is there's very little accountability. Very little accountability in the power structure, the patriarchal structure. Even this Pastor Bill Hurd, he's now counseling children that have been reported sex abuse from a fundamental school. Here, what he did in my life, and now he's, I find that just very dangerous, but there was no repercussions for him not reporting. But that just goes on and on and on. And
yeah, the accountability piece is so important, Coral. I'm glad that you brought that up.
But it's not there, whether it be in the Catholic Church, Christian Church, patriarchy, no matter what. And that's, I guess, the cruelty of it all too. It's like you can see it, you've experienced it, and then you become the victim. You're the person who, for years, they do not let it go. They will punish you for years. Mm-hmm. They will. Right. Their goal is to break you. And I just hope the young people too, using social media, will read and study, use critical thinking skills, read books like mine and others, and listen to podcasts like both of yours. And we just need to continue to use our voice. But I'm just hoping that people examine what's going on in their church. Examine.
And that's, yeah. Oh, go ahead. Christophe.
I was just going to just affirm Coral in that way, and the accountability I think is so important. This is why, and back when we started the podcast, we really were harping, and we do still harp on the rule of law, right? The law of that everyone should that because you happen to be a church, you shouldn't get special treatment under the law, right? We give Christianity in particular an exalted status that is really above the law. I mean, can you imagine if a group of atheists had the record of child rape that these churches have? I mean, they would be eviscerated. They would all go to prison, right? We would all say this is insane, but we all kind of and including me. I mean, I don't really, but like our entire culture, let's say, shrugs its shoulders when we hear another victim coming forward. So accountability is absolutely critical, because people change their behavior when they're held accountable. That's the only time people change their behavior, when there's an accountability.
It's just not there.
No, it's not.
And I don't know how you even get that or achieve that in a courtroom when you're up against a male judge, say a pro se litigant, saying everything right, knowing case law, saying everything right, and the judge just puts her on mute. How do you
It's just
deal with that?
It's the way our society is set up. Society is not there to help you. The courts are, they are a judicial system, a system of laws, and they're a judicial system of laws to protect the powerful. That's how it was created years ago. That's how it is. And so you have to go in, especially if you want a divorce, you have to get it legally, but you have to go through that. You have to, women, especially battered women, need to know this is how you're going to be treated. This is what's going to happen. You're going to be re-traumatized. You're going to be harmed. And you just have to accept it. And I tell women, because I'm not a part of a lot of advocate groups, or none of them really, many of them are patriarchal in their ideology. And I have been so harmed by patriarchy. I cannot be a part of that. I have to be a part of exposing it and shedding light on it. So many of them are still attempting to change the system. And I literally, because they can read my book or other good works, but I literally say, until patriarchy is upended, this will never change. For minorities, for women, anybody that's oppressed or voiceless, it will not change until patriarchy is upended.
I think that's absolutely right. I couldn't have said it better myself. I think that's
that was well said.
Very well said, Coral. Very, very well said.
I do write and speak graciously about it. I mean, I know many people in the patriarchal system, and many of them are there because they were born into a family that then taught them that, and they stayed there. So some people are victims really of their environment and have not used their critical thinking skills, or not had, just not been on that journey to walk out. But if I could just share something from my book that's often quoted in many circles, you try to find words. And like I say, it's not fruitful to be, putting others down. That's, I just hope everybody's doing their journey in their time. But I did write at the end of my book, I do have a spiritual journey part at the very end of my book. I didn't want that to be a part of the body of the book, but at the end, if anybody wants to know my journey, I said, I believe our goal should not be eliminating religion, but illuminating the tactics by which it commands obedience and discourages doubt, so that people can recognize these and reject them. It is more important that we all make up our own minds, use reason to guide us, and do not passively rely on faith or authority of religious leaders. Rather than keep our thoughts in captivity, we should set them free to explore wherever they wish, to seek out different viewpoints, to question fearlessly, and most importantly, to expose all ideas to the fire of testing. The ones worth being kept will survive. Humanity has a vast potential to accomplish things as yet undreamed of, but blind faith will never take us there. If we are to become aware of the dangers that beset us and enter into a future where we can realize this potential, This is the way we must learn to live. So examine all the ideas to the fire of testing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And, one thing that we talk about on the podcast, and my podcast is called Radically Human with Christophe Difo and Liz Wilson. And we put out episodes fairly regularly, usually every couple weeks. And we have a lot of fun, but we talk about the importance of rational thinking, of challenging these power structures, right? That's what is so important, that we are prepared to challenge those power structures, and and we get inspiration, Coral, from folks like you, and who are standing up, who are confronting this stuff, and you're doing it in a way that is super brave. So my hat is off to you, Coral. And you too, Marianne. I'm glad, and thank you for, I really love that you had it, like, that you are doing this. This is super important work.
Oh, thank you. I totally appreciate both of you and coming on here and discussing this, because it's a very important topic that people don't maybe even recognize or think about or never even heard before.
Mm-hmm. My co-host Liz frequently says that, right? If it's like the movie The Matrix, right? It's like when you're living in the Matrix, you don't realize you're living in the Matrix, right? So when you're living in patriarchy, a lot of people don't even realize that is the system that they're living in. That's why it's important. These shows like this episode and Coral's voice are so critical, because we're pointing it out. Like, look, here it is, and here is a person who has been abused by it. This is real. This is really happening, right? And I try to do the same with white supremacy as well. It's like, no, this affects real people every day, and you can't see it because you may not be impacted. You don't know realize you're being impacted by it, but you are being impacted by it. We all are. And until we upend these systems, like you said, Coral, people will continue. We will all, but especially women, will continue to suffer.
And I believe too, patriarchy, it takes away from people being humane to one another. That's a fact in my life, my past, and many people I talk to. It's the cruelty and the questions of why others are acting so inhumane.
It is. It's people are very inhumane. I don't know what's happened to society.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marianne.
Well, thank you. How can people reach you, Coral, if they have any questions?
Well, my email, they can go to my website. I believe under the media link is my email, but my website is www.coranikathill.com. And my email is coraltheill@hotmail.com.
Thank you. And Attorney Christophe, how can people reach you?
Sure. You can go to christophdifo.com, or you can go to, or you can email me personally at chrisdifo@gmail.com.
Oh, I totally appreciate you both coming on. This was very fascinating, and I totally appreciate the both of you and your input.
Hope we can do it again.
We will do it again. I'd like to have you
pleasure.
both back on.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Don't jump off. Slam the Gavel's a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms. I am your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here with Coral and Christophe here in the future, and other exciting guests. Thank you so much.